All right. Well, so good to be here. Don't spend much time here at the Dharma Center nowadays. I do enjoy being here now. So I hope that all of you are well and that you are able to be in your homes or however your life is modified, that you're finding opportunities to use this time purposefully. One of the, I think, most important things about times like this is it just gives us an opportunity to cut through so much of our preoccupation, so much of our lives, they just busyness, just stuff we've done, just another day to get through, time to kill, stuff to do. And in times like this, we can really have an opportunity to clarify what's really important, what's meaningful. How do I want to spend a day that will never come again? How do I want to show up for this rare and precious life that I have? Some real opportunity here in that sense. In adversity, there's also opportunity. Often much more than in complacency. So I do hope that you are making some good use of this time and finding ways that you can cultivate this rare and precious life in a way that is watering the seeds of no more suffering, self and others. So before I begin, I just wanted to check in and see if anyone had any questions or anything's been percolating regarding any Buddhist teaching and where you're at now, or on the three principal aspects of the path that we've been going through. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and just see if anyone had a question or anything that's come up. Often we get through this teaching and there's not much time for questions at the end. Our teaching time gets narrowed down rather quickly. So if you do, I think there's a little button to raise your hand. And I don't think I can see everybody. It's a pretty big group. Okay, not seeing really any questions. Any hands? Okay, if something does come up, just raise your hand. I'll try to keep an eye out over here and we'll get to you. Hopefully. Yeah, a lot of people here. Good, so good to have you here. Oh, there's a question and answer little thing that popped up here. Q&A. Oh, someone just mentioned they missed the room too. All right. So we've been going through the three principal aspects of the path, this pith instruction by Je Tsongkhapa. And we have gone through the first two, I think, in great depth, Renunciation, Bodhicitta. And we're on the verses regarding wisdom, the nature of reality. The actual liberation is this opportunity to see things as they are, to experience ourselves as we are, to cut through the delusion that gives rise to our samsara. And so we're going to enter into this these verses here, which I think take one of the most, for me, clear approaches of understanding what we call the two truths and the understanding of inherent existence, and how that the way it does not exist. It's just a very systematic way. And so matching our understanding of what often is called voidness or emptiness, really giving a breadth of understanding to that in a way that I think makes so much sense and is very approachable, not very esoteric. But it does require some very wise discernment. But it's so approachable. I really appreciate it. So just as a basis as we enter, just to recap a few things. The world that we experience, the way I experience this world, and the way you experience this world, while some things may seem very similar, it's always very different, actually, when we look a little more deeply. All of you, as I mentioned last week, are experiencing a different John right now, right? You're all seeing this image of John, but all of you are experiencing me differently. Some of you know me more than others. Some have had different experiences with me. Some may have never met me. The words that I'm using, as you experience them, you're going to be experiencing them through the lens of your own knowledge, your own experience, your own practice, through your own culture. So even the words that I use are going to have a different impact on different people based on their own history, life experience, so forth. And this is critical to understand where we're headed towards in the nature of reality. And the nature of reality for each of us is that it's going to be subjective. Our displays of phenomena and self, the way things appear to us, is always going to be subjective. Right? There's no thing outside here that I can see, like the camera I'm looking at, or the wall hangings, or any of these that inherently exist objectively, measurably, from their own side. And I'm going to see them a little bit differently than you're going to see them. And a cat's going to see them a little bit differently, and a turtle is going to see it very differently. And this world that we experience, the people we experience, we're all going to have an experience that's interdependent and arises from causes and conditions, right? Events, causes, conditions that gave rise to me being able to experience something, and you being able to experience something, and whether I'm colorblind or not colorblind, whether, culture I was raised in, and how I see things, and the experience I have, so forth. And that's all, I think, pretty understandable if we, just objectively look at that without even bringing in anything very esoteric, or, I'm going to have a different experience of someone than you may have. You might like someone, I might not like them. I might like someone, you may not like them. I might think a joke's funny and you don't think it's funny. I might think that wall hanging is beautiful, you might not be impressed at all. I happen to like pasta with garlic and oil, aliola. My tongue's tied. But just pasta with garlic and oil and some cheese on there. And a lot of people don't like that. They want sauce, and all those other things. But I find something delicious. Somebody not very impressed. So I think we can understand that. And understanding that's critical, but knowing it's even more important. Because even though we have this talk right now, and I get, okay, things are a little bit subjective, and how I'm experiencing you in this event. And so if this is terrible or not terrible, well, I have something to do with that based on how I was raised, whether I had someone who loved me a little more, or I had some traumatic events, or, what's going on with me through this one lifetime. I'm going to experience different events, going to like certain things, not like certain things. And somebody else will have a different experience in those very same things. I think we can intellectually get that. And then we can forget it pretty immediately and tell people, this meal's delicious, and that this was a long day, and that person's such a jerk, and they're so annoying, and they're so wonderful, and this is the way we talk, and this is the conventional reality that we live in. These things seem very real to us, and we really think so-and-so's a jerk, and so-and-so did this to me, and and they made me angry, and we have this whole world of experience that causes a lot of angst and suffering and anxiety, and also some pleasure and joy when it works out our way and we get to do things that really give pleasurable experiences to us. And it all seems very real, and we want to share the wonderful ones with our friends, and we really want to, bemoan the terrible events and how terrible it was and tell somebody about it. And we kind of live life this way, as though the events that we're experiencing are objectively true and real from their own side, and the same for others. So we kind of live that way. Even though we can have a talk and understand that, wow, maybe this event that I didn't like very much was actually an opportunity for something to see and learn about myself, and maybe understand a little more deeply about where somebody else was coming from, what was happening for them, and the dynamic of interdependence in a moment of, what am I bringing to that moment? And what is it about me that I brought into a moment to experience something like that? And what if my attitude was different, right? What if I had a different perspective on that? What if I understood this person that, gave me a hard time was just trying to get their needs met versus somebody who's in my way? Or what if I understood that they're just like me, that they have suffering, trying to find happiness, and maybe this event that I'm not experiencing so well might have something to do with, I wasn't very patient, or, I had some other agenda, or they weren't doing what I wanted them to do. Not that they're a bad person and they got in my way. Maybe I'm in their way. And if I had a different perspective or a different attitude, or was in a better mood, or wasn't tired, what would that event be like? Well, if we start to understand this, we can start to see how the events and situations in our lives, have a lot to do with us. It does have something to do with others. It does have something to do with the events themselves, but it's an interdependent experience, and phenomenon, others, and myself are coming together in a moment. And that moment is appearing to me based on a myriad of causes and conditions that gave rise to that moment. Not any one thing, not any one moment. I mean, how many things went into being to create that moment? This person had to be born. They had to have their parents had to meet. Their parents had to have parents. And, situations had to arise where they, found each other, attracted to each other, and would have a kid and do a life. And this person was born, and then all those experiences they had, and all the things that gave rise for a person to be here in a moment with me, not to mention all the things that had to rise for me to be here in a moment, all of my experience to be here in a moment, and to be here with either an attitude of impatience or patience, or all of those situations, and the air that we're breathing, and whether it's sunny out or cold out, or whether I had my jacket on or didn't, and I was cold and irritable or happy and felt good in a moment. All of that gave rise to a moment that I had an experience of. And sometimes I'll think that this moment was like this because of them. Forgetting that everything that I experience is momentary. And even the anger that I had in that moment doesn't exist now. Unless I want to bring it to mind, then there's a different anger that's arising from another scene. So knowing this is very difficult, because our experience of the world seems very objective and real, and it feels like people are doing things to me, and that the world I'm experiencing seems very concrete. I can get a measuring tape out, start measuring, see it's objective. You can measure it and see it's the same way, or the same length maybe. But this is what gives rise to all the mental and emotional suffering. This is what gives rise to the frustration, the anger, the resentment, and jealousies, seeing things in a way that they don't exist. And because things appear to me in a particular way, deceptively appearing, there's an idiot, there's a jerk, there's someone I don't like, there's my best friend ever, there's the love of my life, there's whatever. For some reason I was thinking of there's my frisbee. I don't know how that popped up. I like frisbee. I enjoy it. And then I really want the things in my life, and I don't want to lose them. And I really don't like those people. I don't want to be around them. And then I really need this to happen to be happy. And so I stress over it. And then it happens. I'm happy for 10 minutes, and then I have something else to stress over. And this plays out over and over and over. This conventional experience that we're having, seeing things in a way that they don't actually exist. We forget the impermanent nature of things. We forget the interdependence of things. We forget the myriad of causes and conditions that gave rise to a moment, but it also gave rise to a new moment. And the person I am now is not the person I was yesterday, nor the person I am now is not who I will be tomorrow. We can forget all that and really have a strong sense of who I am and what I need and what I like and what I don't like and how I need to be heard and how, I. And out of this arises, our fundamental source of samsara, identifying me and mine with that which is not me and mine, seeing things in ways that don't exist, and then believing them to exist, and then creating a lot of attachment and desire and fear and anxiety around those things that don't exist the way I see them. I mean, they don't exist the way I believe they do. Pausing there, just let that settle in for a moment. So I want to then take it a step further. So within Buddhism, we want to bring in that in these causes and conditions is the law of cause and effect, karma, the karma that I've created. And the karma that I've created, how it combines with my experience of phenomena, my experience of self, how I see myself now as a human being, how I experience myself as a human being, and how I experience others has a lot to do with my karma. My karma has given rise to a human form that intermingles with the karma of this world and others and my parents and in the baseline of my consciousness, all of these karmic imprints that pop up, they color my experience of phenomena of myself, that shape how I experience what I'm looking at, what I'm feeling, that give rise to a body, health or not health. And if we can get there, it's a whole nother opportunity to start to recognize that if I'm having a pleasurable experience or an unpleasant experience, well, I had something to do with that previously, creating karmic seeds that created habits and tendencies and a way of seeing the world. To have an unpleasant experience when somebody else had a pleasant one in the same situation. And then we have an opportunity to really start working at the root cause of my suffering. Starting to change my karma, starting to change how I experience the world by cultivating more virtuous activities. Start letting go of the non-virtuous and combining that virtuous with a more clear understanding of the nature of reality, of wisdom, of emptiness. And herein lies the magic of the path of awakening. combining merit and wisdom, the two accumulations for liberation. So that's where we've been getting to right here. And that cultivation of compassion, bodhicitta, merit, and the renunciation of this delusional thinking, the motivation to overcome suffering, not merely for myself, but for all sentient beings, and combining that aspiration, that bodhicitta, motivation, with virtuous action based in an understanding of cause and effect, the nature of the phenomena and myself in a way that accords with reality. This is where we're at in the text. So I'm going to pause there just for a moment to see if anyone had any questions or make sure there's some clarity. But just to summarize that again, then, based on wholesome and unwholesome behaviors, based on karma I've created, based on the habits and tendencies that I've built up, an inertia of how I experience the world myself. Wholesome activities result in pleasurable experiences, unwholesome result in unpleasant experiences. If we understand that dynamic, we've covered that. The seeds that I planted previously arise in dependence upon what I'm seeing in front of me. And that's why something that I see in front of me, anger can arise, joy can arise, pleasure can arise, sadness can arise. Same event, same experience, same thing I'm looking at. This is a condition that gives rise to something that has a karmic imprint in myself. If there's no seed, then there's no anger. So the same thing that may have became a condition that gave rise to anger, well, if there's no seed of anger, no karmic imprint for that seed to arise with that type of event, it won't arise. You'll notice that some people get angry at certain things that other people don't get angry at. You'll notice that some people don't get angry very often, and some people get angry a lot. So the seeds, these karmic imprints that we've been cultivating, arise in dependence upon my experience. And then, but I can work on the seeds, I can work on the imprints, and then change my experience. And the more wholesome seeds, the more cultivation of karma that is beneficial and meaningful, then I'm going to have a lot less annoying people in my life. And I don't need to change them. Okay? I'm going to have a lot less jerks in my life, and I don't need to change them. My food can taste a lot better, and I don't need to become a chef. My experience of the world and all the phenomena and myself can be much more meaningful, pleasurable, and I don't have to change all that. I change the karma that experiences all that. Yeah, that sounds hopefully pretty clear. So I just want to check in, see if anyone think there's a little chat button. Yeah, so good question. Is there a way to create positive karma related to past childhood trauma? Absolutely. Any trauma, any previous trauma, any harmful event. And also a clarity point here is when we've had a traumatic event happen that we've experienced, that's not our fault. A lot of times the discussion on karma says, well, you created the karma for that, it happened. And that's not the way it works. Yeah, I created some karma, and multiple lifetimes ago, and all that arose, where if an event happens to me at all, whether it's joyful, traumatic, whatever, I had some part in that. I've created some karma in that. But for someone to harm me, for somebody to, harm me in a traumatic way, well, I didn't create all their karma. I didn't create the karma of the culture and the environment that allowed that to happen. I didn't create the karma of the United States if it happened in the United States. I didn't create all the karma of samsara and all the situations of that person's life and all the traumas that they may or may not had that came together. Again, all of these causes and conditions that came so that I got harmed. That's not my fault. That's a much bigger experience. And all of this karma that we're experiencing collectively playing out. I had some karma in it, but it's not my fault. And so that's really important to understand. I didn't have it coming. Having said that, the fact that it did happen, the fact that I endured a difficult event, a traumatic event, well, that karma is gone now. It can be gone now. And that's the key, is that these difficult things that happen in our lives, as that plays out, we can be free of that karma. It's ripened and now released. And then the question becomes, from an event like that, what did I learn? How did I grow? How do I utilize the life that I do have? What did I cultivate out of that event, becoming a survivor? Because now I'm not that little person, that little kid. Now I'm a grown adult now, and this did happen, and it was harmful. What are the resources now from that event, the wisdom of understanding and survival and experience that I can have and bring to the world? So an event like that actually transforms into often a bodhicitta motivation of great compassion for all others that have ever had to experience an event like that. It can even combine with a compassion for the perpetrator of such an event, ultimately, which would take some work, but to understand the karma that they've created and the suffering that they'll endure. And so an event like that can give rise to an incredible amount of great compassion, which is ability to really cut through a lot of suffering and be very inspired to nurture all the tools that I've developed to survive something like that, to grow and to develop myself, and to recognize those inner resources that I have, and to have compassion and understanding of the suffering that many others endure just like me. So I hope that is helpful. The fundamental piece here that is incredibly powerful to understand is that we're always becoming. We're always becoming. I'm not stuck. I'm not frozen. I'm not my traumatic event. That's something that's part of the experience, this collective experience I've had over time, but that's not who I am today. And what I am today, how I am today, is not who I'll be tomorrow, that I'm becoming. So I'm always becoming. And if I start understanding this interdependent experience that I'm having, I'm going to be more available to flow with my experience that's arising, that exists, and not have to be as imprisoned by past experiences that no longer exist anywhere but my mind stream. Which is not to disregard them or not to have felt them. That's not helpful. To have felt them, to have learned from them, to utilize them in my becoming. And so whatever I feel I am and think about myself, that's changeable. Everything about this is malleable. Everything about this is malleable, changeable. Everything is changing. My body's changing. My neural pathways are changing. My genetics, my gene expression can change. All of this changeable. And so modern psychology is catching up with that, but Buddhists have understood this for a long time, that I can start changing my experience and my body and my brain and all that by shifting my awareness and attention and my activities. And I can consciously shape myself and my experience of the world. And that's working at understanding my motives, my intentions, and my afflictions. And understanding their real sources are here, not there, right? In my imprints, my karmic imprints. Glad that worked helpful. So just pause there, see if there's any other question. Okay, well, let's see if I can get to one verse here. Where we're at is 11. And what I've been talking about a bit are number 10, anyone who has seen the laws of behavioral cause and effect, right? Karma, regarding all phenomena and of samsara and nirvana are never fallacious. They're not false. That's the way things are. And that's not to be taken lightly. And so everything I've just said, that's either true or it's not true. So it's something to investigate, right? It's something to investigate. It's not something to say, oh yeah, that's what, it's written there. We need to check it. We need to test this. Are these moments in my life impermanent? Are they arising dependence upon my attitudes and thoughts and habits? And, do I tend to make things real that aren't real? The best meal ever, whatever. And or is this a subjective experience? And does my habits and attitude play out here? And so I think those are a good starting point to understand that these are not faults. And then we want to investigate about the nature of karma, which is more difficult to discern, right? But not unknowable. And the thing is that it's going to take some time. So, for example, if I were to adopt an attitude that everyone I meet is an old dear friend, and I'm going to adopt this attitude that these people I'm experiencing today, I'm just going to try and greet everyone as though they're an old dear friend. They're part of my dear friends and family. When I see someone with that same light in my eye, will that radically shift the experiences I have of people? Which doesn't mean that they'll be nice to me all the time or any of those things. But how I work with them, how, sometimes an old dear friend can really get me frustrated. But, that's just Joe, I really like Joe. But boy, he'd be pretty frustrated. But I might have more patience with him. So the attitude that I bring to an event, will it shift that experience? And if I do that over time, will I create different sort of imprints or habits that when I see others, I might start experiencing them differently? So this is something we can check out. It's knowable. We can experience that. And then if we do it for a period of time, we can start to see if I start engaging more wholesome activities continuously and bring to mind the interdependent experience that I'm having day to day, then everything that I do is becoming an opportunity to cultivate a path of awakening, to improve myself, to improve the world, to be helpful. And that I can be fully present for an event and let it go, and be fully present for an event and let it go. And I don't have to carry the baggage of yesterday. And I can use yesterday as wisdom today to engage in a way that will create a better experience in my future. This is knowable, this is doable, and we can test it. So, back here to 10, you had to have seen that these laws of cause and effect of the phenomena of samsara, never flesh, never fault. That's something that they're saying to really have had that experience, and it takes it even more deeply here. And who has had fall apart the sustained supports of their cognitions aimed at inherent existence, whatever they might have been, has entered the path pleasing Buddhists. That's what we spent a great deal of time on yesterday, how things appear very independent and separate. My little bowl here, my phone, microphone, it's my computer. It seems like that's a computer. And, it's a very independent object there, my microphone and so forth. And so we broke that down last week, understanding that these things that appear as inherently existent are actually dependently existent. Right? They're dependent upon their parts, the metal, the technology, the pieces that put it together, the person who created such an idea, that there's so much that went into something to appear as a microphone. And there's nothing independent about it. Everything there is dependent upon, the metal, the wires, all the pieces that had come together at some point, including the idea and the motivation to create something like a microphone or think about electricity. And all of these dependent causes and conditions gave rise to something that I perceive as a microphone. And I think that's a microphone. Cat is not going to see a microphone. Dog's not going to see a microphone. Fish not going to see a microphone. Matter of fact, there's other humans with other cultures who would not call that a microphone, would know what a microphone is. Microphone's in my mind. It's a construct, a concept in my mind, a label I stick on this phenomena that is dependently arising from all those causes and conditions, including an observer, me, who bought or paid for a microphone and has an idea of what a microphone does. But the microphone's in my mind. That's a construct in my mind. When this becomes a microphone or not becomes a microphone, when you start unplugging it, it doesn't work. Is it still a microphone? Or what makes it a microphone? Did it transmit? What if it didn't transmit? And you start pulling it apart. When does it stop being a microphone? And if you're not even using it as a microphone, is it still a microphone? Be using that as an art object. Or you're starting to see a little person's Tin Man. So this is not to say that then our conventional reality says, is it a proper designation for the label microphone? Sure, of course. I live in a conventional reality where I'm using a microphone. I have a camera in front of me, and I have paper with a text. I have a computer here. And if I understand that this conventional reality that I'm experiencing is a dependent arising based upon causes and conditions and events, and that there's no independently self-existent thing or person, then everything I'm experiencing is a dependently related arising, right? Independence upon then I'm going to understand much more clearly the nature of reality, which is that this phenomenon is dependently arising, including me, and it gives rise to my perception of my experience. And based on my karma, that perception identifies it, labels it, has a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience with it. And this is all happening in nanotime. And so it seems very real. And it's not that this isn't real, it's that it is appearing to me in a way that isn't the way it actually exists. And therein lies the real struggle that creates our suffering. Because people, things, and events seem very solid, and they appear to us deceptively, and then we get triggered by them. So we may not get to 11, apparently. But let me see. So once you've recognized this, it's not false, and who has had fall apart those sustaining supports of those cognitions aimed at saying that these inherently exist from their own side independently in that way, whatever they may have been, when that falls apart, then we've entered the path pleasing to the Buddhists. We're starting to experience the nature of ourselves in reality much more in accordance to how it actually is, as opposed to how it's not. And herein lies the path of freedom. All of Buddhist teaching is very simple. We suffer because we identify me and mine with that which is not me and mine. From a Dzogchen perspective, we don't know who we really are. And we forget this interdependent experience that's arising every moment. So we get really stuck, and then we get, I'm really angry, and I'm really like this, and I have these issues, and I have these issues. Where are those issues? I didn't have them a few minutes ago. Now somebody asks me what my issues are, and I'll bring up my issues. Now I've got my issues. In this moment, is there anything to fix? Maybe there's nothing to fix in this moment. And maybe if I start working at the underlying causes that give rise to habits and tendencies and mental patterns and thoughts and the underlying emotional pain that I've been carrying, work with that, then my experience of this can all change. Because I'm changing moment to moment, but I can start working on the real core causes that from my side give rise to my experience, which is here, not out there. So how do you get past the habit of labeling? Good question. And what I want to say is that labeling itself is not harmful. As a matter of fact, labeling, you can't function without labeling, right? If I need to get a microphone, I need to have a label on the microphone. Paper, get me some paper. We need a paper. So labels are functional. Conventional reality is a functional place that we live in. What we do with labeling is we forget that how to use the labeling appropriately. This is, it's appropriate to call that a microphone, answer a microphone. That's an appropriate label. But I'll stick labels on things as though they inherently exist in a way they don't exist. And often I'll stick labels on people, places, and things that may have fit in a moment, but don't fit in the next moment. Like I stick a label as someone is a jerk. Now that label is never going to fit, right? Someone is a jerk. That just doesn't work. Someone did something that I found jerky. Well, that fits. That's more accurate. But they're not a jerk 24 hours a day, right? They are not inherently a jerk. They may do some things that are very kind and generous and do some things that we feel jerk. I've done some things that a lot of people would say is a jerk. Am I a jerk, or have I done something that would be jerky? So labels, it's much more about how do we use them appropriately, And so labels themselves are not the issue. It's understanding the nature of labels, and that things that I see, we often will say merely labeled, and that can remind us of the label, and that label that I'm applying is a construct mentally, but it's useful, right? It's very useful. If I need a microphone, I need to point out what a microphone is: camera, computer, laptop, PC, or Apple. Those labels are helpful in our conventional experience. But to know that they are an interdependent construct is going to be also very helpful. And that when I stick a label on, see if I can do it appropriately. Instead of saying that person is a jerk, I might say, wow, I had a difficult experience with somebody who did something that I found pretty harmful. Well, that's much more appropriate. Accurate. So labeling's okay. It's just skillfully applying labels and understanding how they work. Okay. Time goes so quickly. And then remembering that some labels work temporarily, but don't work, all the time. Even, I'm a morning person, right? We might say that. Or we might say I'm not a morning person. But we also understand that's my experience at that time. But that's changeable too. Okay. So we find ourselves in a time that is challenging. And so I just labeled this a challenging time. I could label this time a difficult time. I could label it a time with much adversity. I think that works. In this time, there's much adversity, but apparently there's always a lot of adversity in any times that we experience. There's also opportunity in the times that we experience. So what I pay attention to becomes my reality. These are difficult times. And that's what I focus on. And that's true. And we don't want to sugarcoat that. In these difficult times, are there good things happening? Are there helpful people? Is the environment getting a little cleaner and healthier? Is animals coming back to life? I just saw a photo in India of the Himalayas that they hadn't seen in 30 years because the smog's gone. There's a myriad of things going on at all times. And understanding that view is going to be helpful in times like this, which is also understand that we're always in times like this, right? And by that, I mean, we're in times where humanity and animals and our experience in samsara are struggling to find ways to be okay, to get their needs met, to have some happiness, to avoid suffering, to grieve around difficulties, and to engage in life in ways that we find meaningful, and to have to face adversity. This pandemic we're in now, there's one in 1918. It's not the first time it's happened before. The nature of the experience that we're having is the nature of samsara. If we start to understand that that is the nature of life, we don't have a delusional thinking that this should not have happened, as opposed to there's causes and conditions that gave rise to it. And then the question is, how do I improve it? How do I engage with it? How do I work with this experience in ways that offer me an opportunity to truly be beneficial on this path of awakening and to others? So we don't waste a lot of time thinking about things that we think should or should not have happened, and engage with what is happening and attend to it in a much greater perspective that even my worst day, there's some good things that happen. And even in my best day, there's some terrible things that have happened. But each of these days, and everything that happens, is an opportunity for me to cultivate merit and wisdom in this path of awakening, to help free all beings from the prison of samsara. And out of this, who knows, there may come an incredible connection of humanity in a way that has been lacking for a while, that's caused so much division. And There may be some amazing things that come out of this. I don't know. But I do know that if we bring some more compassion, loving kindness into the world, there's more loving kindness and compassion in the world right now. And we'll suffer less, and we'll help others suffer less. So I hope this teaching has been helpful in that sense, to have us start investigating the nature of our experience and understand that how I'm experiencing this is subjective, and that it is based on a myriad of causes and conditions that are giving rise in any given moment to how I experience it. And all this is very dynamic. So we're never stuck. Okay. Yeah, well, thank all of you. I see some nice notes here. Just, I know we've gone a bit over, but hopefully you found it helpful. And so we'll come back to this text, and we're really at 11 and really understanding, I think, a really pithy instruction on the nature of dependent arising and the nature of how we experience things in a more accurate way. So let us now take a little time to dedicate the merit and wisdom that we've accumulated here together, today together. Let us dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we've accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes. Let us dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering, find liberation, and may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to help us recognize more accurately the nature of our experience, reality, to cultivate merit and wisdom, to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let us also dedicate the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all the spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions who are authentically teaching a path of no more suffering. May they live long, may their teachings flourish.